Evening, everyone. Seeing that we're coming up on 7 o'clock, if I could ask everyone to please take a seat. We do have quorum, so we can actually get started, which is great. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our second night special council meeting. As we begin, I wish to acknowledge the Sauk people on whose traditional territory we gather, and that we recognize together and respect our neighboring First Nation government as well as their historical relationship with the lands that continues to this day. So, Council, we do have before us an agenda for the special meeting that was posted. Last night, though, we found that we did sort of section by section and then allowed for public input after each section. So if that works for you, I think it would be good to continue with that format tonight. We're not in committee of the whole, we're in special council meeting, but I think there will be more questions as we hear the reports as opposed to just allowing public input up front. So if we could have approval of the agenda with the supplementary information and additional public Q&A to follow department presentations. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Berger. Question, Councillor?
Through your worship, are we going to set the time again like we did last night?
Yes, and the other thing is we were targeting a completion at 9 o'clock, so if that works for everybody, let's try to get to that as well. Okay, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. So I'll turn this over to our finance director then to introduce tonight, and maybe if you could also introduce the staff that are here this evening as well, because perhaps not everybody has met everybody. And welcome, gentlemen.
Sorry.
We've started now, so we've just approved the agenda. We're getting into intro. So go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So tonight we're going to be addressing the capital budget, and in particular we're looking at the engineering, sewer, and parks departments. So we'll do the capital and the operating budget for those departments. Hopefully get through all that tonight. So with us tonight, the staff are at the front so they can answer some questions, and I'll just sort of move us along as best I can from back here. So Laura Hooper is here, of course, for Parks, and Rob Howitt is Director, Brian Derrick for Engineering, and Dan Skidmore for Wastewater. Okay, so I'm not going to go over the overview again of what we did last night. I'm just going to jump right into this, but I will make this just a bit smaller, and just so you know what pages we're on here. We're doing this. We got to rotate this again. Hang on a sec. Okay, so this page is basically the capital budget summary, all on one page for showing all the 5 years. So the general project areas down at the bottom, and then how it's being funded up at the top. And we're going to get into the general project areas. In particular, we're going to start off with engineering. So you can see down at the bottom, that's 1.6 million of projects for 2018, 1.7 for 2019, et cetera. And the details are on the next few pages of these really small numbers. I'm really trying to make them smaller for everyone, but it's about as small as I can get them, sorry. I will expand this a bit, and then we'll get into the discussion on the engineering projects. We're not going to talk about the carryovers because Council's already approved those. But so it's all the projects under the subtitle here, new, in the engineering area, and Brian will walk you through those. And some are kind of parks related, so Laura may take over in that case, and then Laura will, I think we'll just go through each 5 years of the engineering area, and then we'll switch off. So I'll hand it over to Brian now.
To me, Your Worship.
Okay.
We're going to start with the Demamio Creek pedestrian crossing.
Okay.
So essentially that was put forward and approved by Council a year and a half ago through the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee, and it's a study to come up with a best plan for the pedestrian crossing of Demamio Creek to connect the Sun River community to the school sites, and therefore through the town center. So this budget is for a consultant to come up with a 50% design drawing in 2018.
Do you have a question about that, Councillor Casper?
Do you ask questions now or later?
Well, if you'd like to go now, or we can hear the whole presentation, and if you want to save it for then, but maybe if you're not writing them all down, we can just go as you like. But maybe if we're going to talk about Demont Mill Creek, maybe we can answer everyone's questions now then, so we don't keep going back to it. Or
Sure.
Go ahead.
Just through the Director of Finance, to you, or through you to the Director of Finance, we approved at our last council meeting awarding a contract to somebody that had to do with Demont Creek, and it was for $5,000 or $7,000 or something.
Through your worship, you're correct, Councillor Casper. There was a RFQ that was awarded, and this budget that you see is to cover that award. It's carried over from 2017, and then we added an additional $4,000 in change, close to $5,000 for the overages that request for quotes garnered. So this is a carryover from 2017 with an additional $5,000 for the overage for that RFQ.
Okay. And that's it, right? That's all it's going to be? Just through you?
Yes, through your worship, that's correct.
Okay, great.
Correct.
All right.
Any other questions from councillors on that? Maybe I'm having some rotating issues. Can you tell me which page that is, please? 7? Page 7. Okay. Thank you. Okay, sorry, go ahead, please.
The next item in the new part of this budget is the Murray Road staircase, and that it is allocated $75,000. That is a result of the RFQ that was posted a few weeks ago, and it has come back, and we are ready to proceed. So this is to cover off that budget, to replace the Murray Road staircase that had failed earlier in 2017.
If I may, Your Worship, we will be coming forward with a report for Council. I believe it's coming forward on Monday night with regards to the new bid that we received for the Murray Road staircase from a construction company out of Vancouver. Will be coming forward. I believe it's Monday night Council meeting, recommending in favor of proceeding with the bid.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Your Worship, the first engineering project is the 5-year road improvement program, the first year of that for $700,000, and you guys have heard of that extensively through the report, so I won't really get into detail unless you guys have any other questions about it.
No, I think the only thing is just updates as we roll forward, so we know which areas are being done as we go ahead. I think that'll just be good news for everyone to know as it's happening.
Yep, yeah, it's,
Okay.
Your Worship, it's been it's gone out to tender on Wednesday, I believe it was, or through Your Worship,
Okay.
Councillor Parkinson has a question.
Councillor. Okay, Councillor Parkinson, then Berger, please.
Through your worship. So this means with the road improvement, then the sidewalks are going to be going through by the Hope Center and from the center of town. Is that correct?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Parkinson, the issue of the sidewalks in the town centre from basically Otter Point Road to Norden Road, we will be walking into an agreement with the MOT. They are partnering with us. They are going to pay for, at least preliminarily, we understand they're going to be paying for the entire engineering for the whole way. Yet to find out what our participation is, but I would consider that our participation would be we would be able to do sidewalks in a year from now, and we'll bite it off in small pieces as budgets allow. But we won't know what the cost is until we get the engineering from the MOT. We hope to have that in the next couple of weeks.
You may recall we passed a resolution to enter into an agreement with them, and so then it's the design. I'm sort of expecting that we would receive a staff report that would then show where the sidewalks would actually go on which side, and where perhaps we could have a crosswalk as they cross over. So we'll have more information on that, but we did want to see a plan overall from Otter Point to Whiffen Spit. Go ahead, Councillor Casper. Or, sorry, there's a speaking order. If I can go back to Councillor Parkinson, then Berger, then Casper.
Through your worship, in regards to MOT and the roadway, I've requested that we get the lights for the crosswalks in the center of town. I was wondering if that's in any of the plans. There are, the one by CIBC is quite dangerous and no one can see people crossing there. So I had brought it up with council previously on numerous occasions that we have lights at the 3 crosswalks that are right downtown.
Your worship, in dialogue with the MOT, we have broached that subject. They are considering it, and I'll bring it forward in a staff report as soon as I get the other issue solidified with the with the sidewalks in their entirety.
Thank you.
Hopefully, we can have something.
Councillor Berger, then Casper.
Yes, thank you. Through you to staff, I just, in following up on the road improvement plan, which was a really great package that we got previously, seeing that it went out to RFP, do you know what roads have gone out? Like, have we already identified which ones will be captured in the $700,000 in the capital?
Through your worship, it was in the presentation yesterday. We had a brief overview. It should be in the slides that you have there, but the brief synopsis is it's Eakin Road from Otter Point through most of to Cedar Ridge Drive. There's Cedar Ridge Drive. There's Comarine Place, Rogine Place, Helgeson for a short 80-meter section, and Bell Vista Road, or Bell Vista Place, sorry.
Yep. Through your worship, I put it up on the screen here as well. So. Let's see if I can make it a bit bigger. Does that go any bigger?
Your worship, we do have the list here if you would like Mr. Derrick to read it out. Oh, there.
Okay, good. Councillor Casper, please.
Yeah, sorry. Just to follow up on this RFP. So, is it possible to include the feasibility of putting in ornamental lighting along that stretch between Otter Point and Hope Center? Yeah, or to the ambulance or wherever it's going to go. Because in 2016 we had actually put $200,000 towards that, and nothing happened. And then suddenly, over the years, the money's just got whittled down and whittled down and whittled down. I don't know where the rest of it went to this day. I just don't know. But I just want to see something being done on the other side of the street to equalize the $4.5 million that was spent on this side of the street, of Otter Point Road. I said, we'd made a commitment in fairness to those businesses because, quite frankly, to this day, I still get comments. How come we're left out? And in fairness to all the good work that the staff do, there's a consideration for some of the taxpayers that I want to see fulfilled, and hopefully, is it possible to do that through you?
So this is from Otter Point to the Hope Center sidewalk design. So can that be incorporated?
Your worship, we haven't gotten down to that level of detail with the MOT, but I can certainly broach the subject. And the realization of that portion of sidewalk and out to Norden Road, that it is within the MOT right away, the design parameters will be theirs. Hopefully we can deal with the same kind of parameter, maybe not quite as luxurious as is in the center of town, but something with lights and the amenities and such. But it's nice to have the ministry on board that can work with the property owners if right of way is required, etc. And hopefully we can have something in the next year or so in that particular section.
Okay. So I would agree that it needs to be done. Continue, Councillor Casper.
Just the last point. So, one of the things that was passed on to me as one of the reasons why that work did not proceed, and that was in maybe late 2016 or early 2017, was that there was the question of the road alignment or the right-of-way, and that the existing parking lot and parking may be impacted if there was full utilization of the Ministry of Transportation right-of-way. These are issues that have been long-standing. Now, through you to staff, has that issue been resolved, and will it be resolved through this RFP and this agreement?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper, I anticipate it will be resolved. One of the issues that we had is going it alone there. We would have had to deal with both the ministry to get permission to work within their right-of-way, and we would have had to have dealt with the property owner with regards to access and parking layout, etc. But working with the ministry, I'm anticipating that through the agreement and through the engineering that they're going to provide, that they will look after all those issues that will leave us just to participate in the actual construction of the sidewalk.
That's great. Councillor Parkinson?
So through your worship, I'm in total agreement with Councillor Casper. We have discussed having the banners put up down the street down there. We've had numerous comments from the local businesses. So I would personally like to see, even if we can have a couple of banner stands put up even a short distance, so that there are a few on that side for the Christmas season this year, because they've been asking for the last 3 or 4 years.
Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you need a resolution to that effect, or we'll just note it? We want to see the lights, banners, seasonal ornaments.
Your Worship, I think it'd be good to have a resolution so we can make sure we have it slotted in here somewhere.
Okay. So there would be a motion then that council directs staff to work with the MOT to find or placement for ornamental light standards. And that's good, Councillor Casper, and seconded Councillor Pearson. Okay. And in the interim, okay, and then and then it should also be in that an amendment that in the interim that banner poles be installed where possible. Is that an amendment?
Yes, please.
Is the mover and seconder amenable to that? Okay. Did I see staff raise? Go ahead, Mr. Howitt.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to point out that with the MOT, working with them in collaboration for sidewalks, is they don't build sidewalks. They participate in the design. They don't put up anything in the way of ornamental lights. So if the district wants ornamental lights, we will have to participate in the purchase and installation of them. And in the interim, I'm not too sure how we can deal with banners until such time that the engineering is complete, etc. So, I mean, I can work with the ministry, but we're not quite at that level of detail at this point in time.
No, and I can appreciate that they're helping with the engineering and the like. It's just to improve walkability and the beautification program. I think that's where council would like to see that the street lighting and the like be included there. So once you have that and where we can put them, then we'll get the report on that. It's just, I think, going forward, the direction would be that the ministry understands we want to have a more attractive streetscape continue along that way. And I'm prepared to write letters if needed. I'm sure they like to get letters from me. Councillor Pearson, then Parkinson.
Yes, thank you, and through the chair to the staff as well. So to the Director of Development Services, I think we're talking a lot about the north side of the road in that stretch. And if you've ever walked on the south side of that stretch, it's just as bad. And that alignment that's there with some of those businesses, that's been a long-standing issue as well. And I think that it's time that we look at both sides of the road. We're talking primarily here about that north side. The south side is really the side that needs our attention. I mean, you can walk quite comfortably on the north side now, not the south side.
They both need it. There's no crosswalk either, so I think both sides need that attention. Councillor Parkinson? Good. Okay. Any more discussion on the motion then? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Back to staff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next project up on the list is the Beaton Road sidewalk design, which the goal of that project is basically to design a sidewalk to coincide with the road improvements of next year on Beaton Road between French Road and Otter Point Road. So the kind of secondary goal to that project is to get a base sidewalk design that we can use for further sidewalk improvements throughout the rest of the road improvement program, just to have kind of a template to work with.
And then would that also include street lighting as well?
Your Worship, the design strictly for sidewalks wouldn't involve street lighting, as street lighting, ornamental street lighting can be installed relatively. It really depends on the power in the area as to how we drop power to get it underground into the ornamental lights. So it wouldn't be as standardized if you were to include street lighting for that, most likely.
Okay, but going forward though, like where possible, we can install, because it's very dark in those areas, right? So just to like have the sidewalk, but where possible to have the lighting, I think it's important for those safe connections to happen. So that can come that would come at a later time then, a different.
Your Worship, I think what we can do is in the RFP is for the design of the sidewalks, we can include in the design to have street lights allocated, or the positioning of the street lights allocated for, and then maybe budgeted for later. And
Okay.
as Mr. Derrick alluded to, is finding out where the electrical drops is and accommodating that at this point. But as far as installing lights at the same time as a sidewalk, it'll be up to council at that point in time to deliberate the costing.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Pearson?
Yes, thank you. Just a question on that section of road is about, I'm guessing about half a kilometer from there to Beaton to Beaton to Otter Point, or French, where it cuts in. I'm guessing half a kilometer. So where Pyrite cuts in from there, particularly the section from Pyrite to Otter Point Road, which is quite troubled if you've driven it or walked. So $50,000 for the design for the sidewalk seems a little steep to me to design a sidewalk. I'm just asking the question. It seems like a lot of money to design a sidewalk for half a kilometer.
Through your Worship, I'd agree that I believe we'd probably come vastly under budget on that item.
Okay.
But that's just my estimate, I would suppose.
Okay. So second question is that there was discussion somewhere in there that Beaton Road as a feeder road to the lands beyond now, with all those major subdivisions that are up on the hill, there was just discussion about this becoming a DCC section, or that whole road being a DCC section. So would the DCCs then that we collect for the lands beyond help us with funding with actually the repairs and the design for things?
At your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, at this point in time, Beaton Road is not a DCC road. The Director on Finance and myself, we've talked about amending the DCC bylaw to include roads like Beaton that have been ignored for all these years. We just, hopefully after the budget cycle, we can get into deliberations on that and amend that bylaw.
And that was my point for bringing it up tonight is that we've got a number of roads with a number of developments that are turning into major commuting thoroughfares. So I think that it's prudent for us as councillors to be mindful of those roads that are starting off, and that subdivision has been there since 1979 or something. So I think we've got to start considering those as being DCC roads. Thanks. Thank you.
Good. Mr. Derrick?
Through your Worship, I just wanted to mention part of the reason for over budgeting for that design is I wanted to give the opportunity for a full road redesign if that's what we decided to go for with those upgrades, depending on how things went with reassigning the DCC roads for that.
Thank you.
Great, and we'll get a more fulsome report back when the time comes as well. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. Through you to staff, just to follow up on your last comment. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this properly. The portion we're looking at right now is just sort of the tail end, but the budget is there to assess the entire length of Beaton Road should it need to be done?
Through your Worship, the budget addresses the entire length regardless. It's just a matter of whether we're looking at simply designing a sidewalk or whether we're looking at designing the entire width of road.
Okay, so that's why it says road and sidewalk.
Yes.
Okay. And then just as a comment, I guess, if if we do become vastly under the budget, which I like your term, that would be great to include the lighting at looking at it within that budget as well. And then just one quick question through you to our Director of Finance. It says in the budget that this entire $50,000 is already coming from DCCs, so is this project going to have to be on the back burner until we can amend that bylaw?
Or
Through
Finance
your
Director?
worship to Councillor Berger. Yep. Last night we discussed the Beaton and Charters roads. We're hoping to have those become part of the DCC bylaw. And yes, until that bylaw would be approved, then we wouldn't be able to allocate the funds out of the DCC budget. So we won't until we'd be once the budget, once council agrees kind of with these projects as priorities and the potential funding sources, we'd bring forward the with a bit of help on the DCC road bylaw.
Thank you.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, Drew, just a couple of general questions, and that's dealing with the design concept. Are we going to be using our development and design standards bylaw for sidewalks and roads? Will it incorporate a swale? Will it be curb and gutter? And if it's either, I have a very strong suggestion that we utilize the least amount of road surface or potential road surface area or parking area, and take the sidewalk as close to the private property lines as possible. And the reason for that, we've got a number of glaring examples where sidewalks have been put into play, and it gets to the point where almost two vehicles cannot pass each other down a road. If there's parking on one side or the other, it creates a bit of a nightmare. And it just seemed as though it looked like decisions were made because it was convenient and to get it as close to the existing paved surface as possible. I just think that's a bit of an error because you're cutting down future road surfaces for bikes and or vehicles and parking, especially along that road, because is there not a park near there?
Yeah, there's a very popular park for kids is
And-
there where you want them to bike and walk
that's
to.
that's one of the main reasons why I'm suggesting this, is because you don't want to have a sidewalk then suddenly eat up potential parking area adjacent to a park. So, and there may be parking on the other road, but still, if it's going to be a busy park and if we want to spend money there and improve it, it'll get busier. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Derek?
Through your worship, yeah, I just wanted to mention that upgrades that we'd be doing to Beaton Road east of Pyrite would be reconstruction, given the shape of the road. So we wouldn't really be handcuffed by current extent or edge of pavement, just as we'd be ripping up the paved surface and redoing the base regardless. So that would be something definitely we can look into.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Staff could continue, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the next item is the Otter Point to Hope Center sidewalk design, which we've already touched on. And if no one has anything further, then we'll move onward. So next up is the Charters Road design. So this is for the narrow section of Charters Road where it goes down the dip. And as you may have noticed, if you've ever walked there and looked, first off, there's no room to walk really. And also, as the years have gone by, we're starting to see the bank sloughing off to the side. So we would like to get a design there where we could incorporate a pedestrian walkway at the side of the road and shore up that bank so that we don't have to worry about losing the road into the creek, for lack of a better term. So for this year, we'd be looking at getting a full engineered design for future construction.
Good. Next.
Next, we have the Phillips Road Sightlines RFQ, and this is just a small project. We've had a lot of feedback from the residents at the north end of Phillips Road about the condition of their road and sightlines around the first hairpin corner before the road gets super narrow. So in this, we'd just be looking at clearing out a raised portion of land on our right-of-way that includes 2 small trees just to open up that sight line so that you could actually see around the corner, because currently you've only got about a 10 to 15 meter sight line around there. So it's just, as I said, a small project just to make that corner a little bit safer. So next up is the Gatewood Road design between Grant and Eustis. Council has shown interest in us looking into being able to connect either temporarily or permanently Eustis Road to Grant Road for events and whatnot. So for this, we'd basically, the main part of that design, we've already got the pathway there, which would be quite easy to turn into a road and open up a little bit. So the main portion of this small design RFP would be to design the intersection between at Grant Road and the Gatewood Trail connection. That would be the vast majority of the design work there.
Question, Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, through the chair, too. So this is just a temporary, so that we could use it for like the fall fair, et cetera, like that. It will be closed off most of the time to vehicular traffic. Is that the kind of the thought process in that you're looking for there?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, back some time ago, there was a council resolution to look at the design, and at that time it was felt that the council was looking at a design for a road that would connect Eustis to Grant, and that's what this budget would be for, is to do a high-level design from an engineering perspective to see what it would take to have a road that would actually be able to connect to Grant Road. The design for the road itself is probably not that expensive to do, but the design, the majority of the monies that we're asking for right now would be looking at the intersection of Grant and Gatewood. But it was felt that council was looking at it from a design parameter for a road, not just something temporary.
So I would like, and I'm going to see what my fellow councillors say, is that we're in a design phase, but I think it's important to recognize that, every year the fall fair comes to us and asks if, we can have a temporary open. So a little preemptive strike to having that in the design to say, how do we open it up in the short term? Because, it's a ways off before that's going to be budgeted. The design's there, the budget for the road itself. So I would like this design to include how do we pull out a bollard and turn it into, the one weekend a year or something. So,
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson, we've already done that. We've made both ends. We've removed the rocks. We put bollards in. We actually did some minor remediation at the Grant Road end. So the fall fair, and there was somebody else that just applied to use it as well. So, but there's still requirements for flag people, et cetera, as they use it. But it's a lot more convenient to get it open now.
Yep, and I appreciate the work that staff did on that last year, and I just keep it in mind is that it's still going to be needed for that temporary. So that's good. It's covered. Thank you.
Councillor Casper, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, your microphone was on.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Berger, did you have a question?
More sort of just a comment, and it worked really well at the last fall fair, so that was fantastic that they got that going. But it's always baffled me. I think there's one property in between Caldwell and Eustis. And I think we talked about it last year or a couple of years ago, that I believe it's an ALR piece, but it would be nice to work with that property owner so we can have actually a throughway all the way through Eustis to Caldwell rather than utilizing a path all the time. So more so just a comment.
Yeah, Your Worship, just for an update on that, we did approach the owner who lives back east. The answer was anything but favorable when she was approached, but we do have an application for a development on that property at this point in time, and we will be working with the developer to try to get something through there.
Good. Okay. School traffic action plan?
Thank you, Your Honor. The school traffic action plan, we had one of our planners that was on the committee with regards to the safe route to school, if I can use that vernacular, and through their deliberations they came back and identified 3 or 4 fairly quick remedial actions to make the through Church Road area a little more amenable to pedestrian traffic, such as painting, revisiting the crosswalks, some signage along Throop Road, etc. And this is what the $15,000 is for.
Okay, thank you. 4,000 this year. Okay.
Excuse me, I can't read apparently.
Okay. Souk River Road, the drainage there.
Thank you, Worship. Over the past 4 or 5 months, I've been working with a property owner out there trying to find a suitable right-of-way that works for them, and we've made pretty good ground, so we're still in the process. It ultimately comes down to how the homeowner feels with that. Otherwise, we'll have to pursue a different route, but we're hoping that we can find a path forward that's favorable for both us and the homeowner, and if so, we can get that done this year. So.
Okay, great, thank you. It would be nice to see that one checked off. Kennedy Street South drainage?
So thank you, Your Worship. At the southern termination point of Kennedy Street South, we have a road right-of-way that carries down to Water Street, and on that road right-of-way we have a piece of rusted-out infrastructure that's actually above ground and poses a bit of a safety hazard and an eyesore. And it's not functioning at all, and because of that, we've seen Water Street slowly washing out over time. So the plan with this is to replace that infrastructure through to Water Street and then down through Cairns Park to the ocean. And at the same time, we're going to repair Water Street, and we're also going to rough in the embankment for a future pathway to connect from Kennedy Street South down to the beachfront at Cairns Park. And we already have a design on the shelf. It's just a matter of once we have the budget, we can move forward with construction.
Great, thank you. Councillor Casper, you had a question?
Yeah, so just to clarify through you, so it's $100,000 additional, and so what's the total cost anticipated for that Souk River Road? I know we had originally, there was an estimate done, it was $300,000 in total. So it was so now it's down to about $250,000, is that what you're suggesting?
Through your worship, it really will come down to where we end up with the design, but with the options that we're looking at, we're fairly confident it should be in the $200,000 to $250,000 range if things work out as we hope.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Development Services Vehicle.
Your Worship, this was budgeted, or this has been in the budget for a few years now, and it was anticipated, we have been anticipating that we would need another vehicle for our development services staff to do field inspections, etc. We're not expecting to purchase a truck for this price, but we're expecting that we should be able to buy a fairly economical vehicle. We were looking at potentially buying an electric vehicle to help us advertise if we have an EV station in our parking lot here. But we do need another vehicle for inspections.
Okay. Streetlight installation program.
This has been in the budget for, I believe, for the 4th year. It's just a budget that allows us to deal with our ornamental street lighting when they get knocked down, etc., or repairs needed.
Speed sign trailer.
Thank you, Your Worship. So for the speed sign trailer, we've had the speed reader board for quite a while now. One of the problems we faced with it is that we're only able to mount it on ornamental poles at this point in time, because Hydro, TELUS, other utilities won't give us permission to use their poles for it in case their crews need emergency repairs. So what we're hoping for with the speed sign trailer, it's a portable trailer that we can just hitch to the back of the truck, drop off on any street where we'd like to post it for any given amount of time. And that way our sign, we'd be able to put it anywhere within our road right-of-way around the district to cater to where demand is for tracking traffic and speed and whatnot.
Okay, is that fairly secure? Like, would that sign be somehow physically attached to the trailer. Just wouldn't want it to walk away.
Your Worship, yeah, it's a purpose-built trailer built by the companies that make the signs. So they have locking mechanisms on them to keep the signs secure.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson?
So with the, through your worship, with the signs, you can track the speed of different cars going through or number of cars, or how does that work?
Through your Worship, yeah, the speed sign kind of has two functions. The first function is to show a person once they've passed a certain speed threshold how fast they're going in effort to slow them down, make them realize they're speeding. And the second function is that it tracks and logs speed data. So every car that passes through there, that data is logged by date and time, and that way we can format that into reports to share with the RCMP.
Councillor
And license
Parkinson?
plate?
No. I don't know that it captures.
Through your Worship, no, there's no photo on it.
Okay. And then the transit stop enhancements?
Your Worship, yes, every year this line item is in the budget, and it's a budget that we use to do improvements at transit stops when we're partnering with BC Transit to put in those transit shelters that you see. We recently this year put in 2. So the District of Sault cost shares with BC Transit by putting in the pads and the infrastructure on which to mount the transit shelters.
Would this budget then allow, is it for 2? This would allow?
It's usually what it covers.
Okay.
That's correct. So we have just installed 2 recently, last week, and that was out of the 2017 budget, and we did the preparation for it. So there's essentially room for 2 each year, notwithstanding what's currently happening on Highway 14.
Right.
Yeah.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, some time ago, I think I sent out an email to whoever, I can't remember, asking that we develop some criteria as to where these transit shelters be located. Are we focusing our efforts in the core town center of Sault? Are we suddenly going to find ourselves putting up a shelter on the bus passenger pull-off that the Ministry of Transportation has announced? No. I sure hope not, because I don't believe in subsidizing what they plan on doing. But I just think that you know, we should develop a plan, you know, like where are we going to put these things? And it should be in close proximity to where people are actually parking their vehicles. Because if we want to encourage people to utilize the transit system, a lot of them have to drive to a place in order to catch a bus. Not everybody necessarily is going to walk to a transit stop, at least, you know, because we actually rely very heavily on vehicles to get around in this community. And I know the efforts are trying to change that, but I would hope that one day we could, through you, ask our staff to come forward with a plan. I was under the distinct impression that Mariners Village there was going to be responsible for a transit shelter. I thought that the development down the road to the old coffee shop down there was going to be responsible or assist in that shelter. I know we had taken some road right away from them, or somebody did, but I just think that if we develop criteria that all of us can get an understanding as to where they're going to be located, and perhaps it could reinforce a message to the community that this is our focus. And we're trying to serve as best as we can the most concentrated levels of population in the community. Because to start putting shelters out in the more rural parts of the community just really don't make sense in my mind. But anyway, you know, that's just my view, I guess. Nobody has to answer my question.
Well, but you're making kind of a statement with an ask in it, so I think we do need to address it. Ms. Hooper?
Through your Worship, yes, Councillor Casper, we do work with BC Transit in their planning department. And they actually, when we suggest certain transit stops that we feel may need them in the town centre, they encourage us to rather put them in places where they have the data that would support the high riderships. So we do focus in the town centre. We do focus on the highest alightments, not necessarily the people getting off the buses, but rather getting on them. And BC Transit is very clear on their requirements for that.
Well, through you, I really appreciate the answer. Thank you very much. And it leads me to another thing that I've talked about for probably 9 years. Why is it that the District of Sault's name isn't co-linked on these shelters? We're paying for half of them. There's no credit whatsoever to our municipality or our taxpayers at all. The motoring public and the pedestrian bus passenger public, they don't have a clue that our taxpayers paid for half of that operation. And I've been asking the previous mayor, I asked the question. The mayor before that, I asked the question. And I know you and I have talked about it before. And now that you're on the commission, Your Worship, that perhaps that's something we could just go ahead, arbitrarily do, and stick up our own little nameplate on that thing. Because all I see is BC Transit. So I think staff that would be a real feather in our cap, everybody, if we started telling people, hey, we help pay for this and take pride in what we're doing. So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate the answer. Well done.
Good. How can we get our logo on that shelter? Just stick it on?
Your Worship, I'm sure that we can, between all of us, we could figure out what to put up on there that would be enlightening to the traveling public that we participated in the transit stop without offending BC Transit.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Okay, good. Thank you. I think that's a very good point. Thank you. Okay, so what we'll do is for this, now we've covered off this engineering section. So are there any questions, Councillor Berger, on this? Let's stick to this section.
Yes, in engineering. Just one more quick question. I know I brought this up twice, and you're probably sick of me talking about it. Just wondering where we are with the electric charging station. Did it go out to RFP? Are we still looking at a supercharger? Because I'm not for superchargers.
No. So at the last meeting when we received that report, we put forward a different resolution that staff come back with areas, strategic municipally owned properties and level 2 chargers, and that we work with the library at supercharger that would be grant contingent for the library at that time. So we're not doing the one here. We're going to look at municipally owned lands, if I'm not mistaken, and to see how many we can do. I think we could do like 4 or 5 probably at a lower cost. That would be equivalent to, actually would be less than doing one supercharger.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that we would pursue a supercharger in tandem with the library under development.
Thank you very much.
Does that covers it, right?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm anticipating we'll be coming forward in not a Monday's council meeting, but the subsequent council meeting with a recommendation about locations for the lower EV charges.
Yeah, good. Any other questions, Councillor Pearson, please?
Yes, through the chair to the engineering department and maybe to the director of finance. Where is there in our budget an assessment of our recent assets? Current state, where there's some risk, because walking around at nighttime, I noticed there's a few areas where we've invested in new trails and some infrastructure where the gravel to the side is starting to wear out, like the Church Road trail as an example, where we went up the side of Church Road. The shoulders are starting to slough away on the section that is west of town center, that where we've got that pavement trail. There's some sections where it's starting to erode on the sides already. So is there somewhere in the budget where we're assessing that? And because it looks like right now there's minor repairs that could be done by just shoring it up with gravel, and so.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pearson.
Through Your Worship, It's part of kind of our asset tracking is part of a working project with our GIS department where we're slowly over time gathering a database of values for all our infrastructure and finding the most effective ways to track it. As with the roads, we did the road report as a way to track our roads, and we're trying to move kind of down the line through our drainage and trails and other things so one day we'll have all of our infrastructure being tracked with an assigned value and with an assigned depreciation rate. So.
Yeah, and thank you for that answer. That's good. It's just that and we're investing significant amounts of money in these trails, and already, and it's not a design fault. It's just the normal wear and tear, and there's certain areas where the water maybe wasn't predicted at the time of us installing it. I just like to see us protecting our assets, and somewhere in our budget doing that assessment. So thank you.
Is there also a contingency for minor trail repair work and the like, cutting down trees or that sort of stuff? Because we're looking at the capital plan, but just further to what Councillor Pearson asked.
Yes, Your Worship, there is through the operational budgets,
Okay.
There is a amount of money that's put aside to assist in materials for park staff to do those repairs. And we do respond through calls for service. We also do regular inspections of these things. So anyone, including anyone in this room or in the community, can call and request those things if we don't catch it on our monthly inspections.
So may I suggest that we could look between Wadham's Way and Throop Road on our new trail? Thank you.
Okay. Other items under engineering in this particular section? Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, just one final comment. In just looking through what we've gone over, I'm not in huge favor of spending $15,000 on a speed trailer sign. The RCMP has Speed Watch, and they have people that set up by the schools and set up different places. I wonder if that's something that they can. Well, I know we have the sign, but that could be our part and parcel donation to RCMP because they have a program already in place that does exactly what that is.
Part of their challenge, though, is finding volunteers at certain times of the day. So that's where we don't often see them. So this way you'd be able to park it and not have to worry about finding volunteers to do it. Councillor Loggins?
And just to follow up on that, the data wouldn't be as accurate because you're only working with volunteers a certain amount of time per day. So when we have requests from the public to have it in a certain area, it'll track data for a longer period of time and have more accurate information.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I don't want to, I agree, okay, if the sign is heavy, then get a trailer and then it can be put on there and you don't have to worry about utility poles. But is it possible to just contact 3 local fabricators and basically get some quotes? Because $15,000 can buy a pretty fancy trailer. You could buy a brand new boat trailer that'll haul a huge boat with that kind of money. So I just look at the 15 grand and I think that trailer is going to be no bigger than 2 of these tables put together, and that seems to me like a pretty pricey trailer. That's just me talking. So.
Well, I hope it's not that big because otherwise in some areas they wouldn't be able to park
Well,
it.
anyway, I'm just saying, it seems like it's pretty hefty price for a trailer.
Mr. Howitt?
Your Worship, there was some research done with regards to the trailer and the costing, and like Mr. Derrick said, the trailer is purpose-built for the speed reader. It is built by the company who produces the speed reader, so it has a way, locking mechanisms and everything else. I mean, we can certainly look at other suppliers, fabricators, and see what the costs associated with an aluminum trailer would be, but it wouldn't be, there may not be as appropriate as the trailer that's actually purpose-built.
Okay, anything else from members of council on this particular section? Okay, I'd like to open this section up for members of the public. If you could just contain any questions to this particular section only. And when you come forward, if you just give your name and address for the record, please.
Oh, sorry.
Cam McIntyre, 2012 Penang Road. My previous life, I was a police officer for 31 years. My question surrounds your speed trailer. I'm left with the impression a citizen will call, complain about a speeder, and you'll move your trailer to that location trying to identify how serious the problem is. Wouldn't it be simpler to phone the local RCMP, or phone, better yet, phone URSU and request their presence at that location? Because you need a deterrence to change the behavior. Seeing a sign is one thing. When you take the sign away, you know what happens? Behavior continues. I mean, the difference between people speaking on their cell phones that have been caught and the ones that haven't been caught, they're just a little crafty or haven't been seen yet. I mean, that's the reality of it. I personally am not in favor of it. There is mechanisms in place to deal with poor driving habits. It's a provincial law, the posted speed. You have a provincial organization in place to deal with it. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak on the engineering section, please?
Ellen Norris, 5526 Souk Road, and I totally agree with Cam. I think it's ridiculous to spend money on something that tells you what speed you're going when you have a speedometer in your car. You already know what you're doing. So if somebody's speeding ridiculously, they're call 911. With the Gatewood Road design, I have a question. Well, first of all, who draws up the designs? I don't understand that.
Mr. Howitt?
Your Worship, through to Ms. Lures, if council sees fit to give us a budget for this, we will go out to RFP for an engineering overview for the road.
Yeah. Okay. So the question I have with the Gatewood Road design, or the comment as well, is it's not only for the fall fair. There are so many people call me all the time. How can we access? How can we close Eustis Road? What do we do? Blah blah blah. I get it from there's CD Saturday. There's Earth Day happening. There's any event that happens in that area. It's a constant. So. A road has to happen, and I understand the Caldwell situation there as well. It makes sense to go straight through there. But something has to be done, and I think more quickly than what's anticipated here. I've said it before with the Legion being made open to the public more. I've gone there so many times, and there's no place to park, even just to park in front of the hall, because you have to go in there. And the cars are parked on that angle because of the way the road was designed. It was a two-way. You could go down Shields Road. The district was the one who put that in as a one-way. And the problem is that the cars parked that way, they have to go up Eustis Road and turn around. And with the fall fair, when we went around there, we have to go around with letters to let everybody know. And the feedback is always, we're sick and tired of people coming and turning around in their driveways. So that, I hear that, I'm passing it on. That has to change. So this is something that has to change now. That's a very busy area. That is a town center, and has been for 100 years. So it needs to be dealt with. So I hope it's dealt with quickly. Thank you. A question I had with the transit stops. Any of them, whether in the rural areas or not, the rural areas, if you see people standing there with flashlights in early morning or late at night, it's kind of creepy. If you've ever stood out there, you don't know if there's a bear or cougar in the background because there's trees around. But why aren't we looking at LED solar lights too? Not only in the transit stops, but also in the shelters, but also just for the stops. It's not a big expense. I mean, it's something that could be put up there. There's another question I had.
Maybe while you're thinking about the question, I'll get an answer on the solar
Okay.
lights.
Through your worship, yes, we every new transit stop that we've put in since 2016 have been solar LED lights in those shelters.
Good.
It's just our standard now.
Good. Okay. So now at the bus stops themselves, that's something to talk to transit about. It's just that where there is no shelter, even to have a light,
Where there's no shelter to have a light.
to have a solar light. People are standing there
Right.
in
So
way
that
in
there's a
the
light.
dark,
Yep.
yeah, in the middle of nowhere. It's quite dangerous. Also, I noted in here that in our because this is highways that looks after, will be looking after these repairs and things on these roads. Is that correct?
For
For our maintenance contract with the highways?
our maintenance contract,
Our maintenance contractors, do they do the road work?
not highways
Now, our maintenance,
with Main Road, do you mean?
main road, yes.
Do they do the maintenance of our road?
They do the maintenance of our roads, correct? Correct?
Main Road does.
Main road, okay. And do they also look after our sidewalks?
Your Worship, the sidewalks are not in the contract with regards to maintenance. If we were to have some sidewalk done, whether it was a concrete sidewalk that was failing, we would have to have a separate agreement with either Main Road or another contractor to remediate it.
So no,
Oh,
they don't look after that.
so like the pathways, like on Wadham's Way, that,
That's our park staff will look after those things. Yeah. Correct?
If I may,
Yeah.
Your Worship, our park staff looks after the maintenance of our sidewalks if needed and when needed. If there's remediation, we would actually have to get a contractor to do whatever. Well, I'm talking about concrete sidewalks. Our other pathways, our gravel pathways, et cetera, our parks people would remediate as required.
okay, and about the crosswalks, about putting lights in the crosswalks, there's also what I see happening in other parts of the city is where they're putting those crosswalks up that are the yellow-green signs that are really noticeable. If you know what I'm talking about. Not the white signs that have a crosswalk. They're yellowy-green and they're very noticeable. The reflective signs. You haven't seen those? Victoria? You see them in Victoria, Oak Bay? No?
I drive.
Don't you
I
people
haven't
drive
noticed.
around? Okay. Well, they are really they're really noticeable, and that's an issue downtown because you don't see the crosswalk. The one that Councillor Parkinson was talking about, the one by the bank, but also the other one down at the bottom at the Royal Bank. It's just not noticeable, and still people are driving across out of the Petrocan and driving right through over 4 lanes, and there should be a one-way sign there that says turn right. Because that's ridiculous, because there's an intersection and 4 lanes, they pull over and turn left on there and go up the other way. That's very dangerous. I just wanted to mention that because I asked that about the highways, because the maintenance contract with the highways is $256,166, and our parks department has $407,493 more in the budget than the highways, than the road maintenance.
I think you're jumping ahead, Ms. Lures. Like
Yeah,
we haven't
well, I'm
gone
just
to
saying
yet,
that.
but-
Yeah, where's
Well-
I'm saying that because I'm trying to figure out who pays for what.
Okay,
Who's-
we'll get that answer during that presentation.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Lurs. Other questions on the engineering section, please?
Gail Hall, do you need my address too?
Probably for the record.
2517 Souk River Road. Just a question here on the Souk River Road part where it's $100,000 and it says drainage dash additional. It's the puddle up close to the potholes. Is that what we're worrying about? I think you should leave it there. It washes the underside of my car all the time. I go through there probably 5 or 6 times a week. I go through there take my dog up for a walk. So, but it's only for what, 3 months of the year, if that even, and that's a lot of money. I mean, I don't really like the way money's being chucked around here, but that puddle, if you run down the yellow line in the middle, it's not a problem. Mind you, the high school kids like to go through at 90 miles an hour. That's their problem. But if you drive it properly, it's not a problem. So, and it's maybe 3-4 months at the most. So I personally think that's $100,000 that you could put back in your pocket. And I don't think there was anything else too drastic. I agree about the speed sign trailer because I know what the high school kids like to do with those too. See how fast they can go and how big the number will be. So I think you're just asking for more trouble by putting those speed signs out on the road. So save some money here. Please.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Thank you. Any other questions on this section from members of the public here? Okay. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Loggins, please, then Casper.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the speed reader because I know that there are a few people here tonight concerned about it, as well as perhaps some people on council. However, I did work with the City of Colwood on a program that put a speed reader in front of Sangster Elementary, and it was in partnership with Island Health, RCMP, ICBC, BC Transit, SD62, and in conjunction with some dawn to dusk 30-kilometer-an-hour signs, and it was a successful project and it slowed people down considerably. So they're still there, I believe. I haven't driven Machosen Road for a long time, but they kept them up in that one area for quite a long time. It's probably been a year now because it was successful and more successful than they expected. So I think there are definitely ways to do it right. That speed sign reader is on a trailer and it's smaller than a boat trailer. So I think this would be a worthwhile investment, and there are certainly ways that we can use it positively in our community, especially in our school zones.
Yes, Councillor Casper.
Yeah, so I'm very supportive of having the speed reader sign. I actually brought all the paperwork and gave it to staff 2-3 years ago, saying, hey, we should get these because I think it's important that in problem areas that we show people how fast they're going so that perhaps they can see the speed sign and then drive accordingly. The only thing I have a problem with is spending $15,000 on a purpose-built trailer. So I'm very supportive of having the reader signs. But now that we've got a snag, and that snag is that utilities won't allow us to put the sign on their poles. So,
Your Worship, through to Councillor Casper, it's not only the issue of what pole we can hang the thing on. The thing is not light. It's, I don't know about 60 pounds, but it's not light. Brian would know better than I am. But it requires staff to be in the back of a pickup trying to hang it up or on a ladder, and it's just not safe or equitable to do it. The trailer allows us, or would allow us, to move it from place to place as required by the complaining public. And it also allows us to move it around in locations where we've had requests for speed reductions or speed signs or warning signs. It gives us statistical data. And we need to move it around from place to place, and it needs to be convenient. And as I said, it's not easy to pack around, and it's not safe to be putting it up on poles, as Brian can attest. I'm doing it on a few occasions, and that's why the trailer. We could look at alternatives in fabrication, but Brian has informed me just a little bit earlier that he did some checking around. And the fabricated trailers, while they may be a little bit cheaper, they weren't significantly cheaper, but we can go down that path.
Okay, great. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. And I agree with what everybody has said here, and I agree wholeheartedly with Ebony and staff and see their value. I just don't believe it's our job. I don't think that our job is to monitor and track and to look after speed. We have the RCMP for that. I did a quick little Google search of their Speed Watch program, and they do it in conjunction with municipalities and ICBC, as Councillor Logan said. So my My thought is that if we already have a sign, then maybe that is our donation to the RCMP, and they work with ICBC, and they do their monitoring, and they move it around to areas that they get complaints of. I just don't feel that it is a municipal government's job to purchase $15,000 trailer for a speed sign when we're not in charge of speeding. So that's just my point.
So on that note, and I'll just want to add one comment on this, we at one point reduced the speed limit in a certain neighborhood from 50 to 40, and sometimes I hear that our roads do not have the appropriate speed posted on it from an engineer, and so perhaps a road can be engineered to actually handle speed at, say, 50, and the posted speed limit is 30, and that's causing issues. So even like speed enforcement aside, and I do agree that that's the role of the RCMP in terms of when roads are improved and the like, it would also be a way to know if what the posted speed is matching a road and how it's engineered. Phillips Road, for example, changes speed numerous times in many, like 50 to 30, I think, and it's back and forth depending on which side of the road you're on. This may be one way of actually determining what the road is engineered and what the actual proper speed should be from an engineer. Maybe. I'm not an engineer, but I hear all the time that this road is the wrong speed and it should be this, and people would drive safer because then they'll actually keep pace with the pace of traffic. Mr. Derrick?
Just to follow up on some of the comments and questions and concerns regarding the speed sign, in terms of RCMP enforcement, often RCMP, the areas that we're putting the sign in are places where the RCMP has been receiving calls for weeks, if not months, about speeding. So the general idea behind the sign is for us to try to track over, say, a 24-hour, 7-day-week period, when are the key times when enforcement is most necessary, because the RCMP in our town is already stretched pretty thin. So they want to be able to target their speed watch when they know it's going to be effective and when they know they're going to catch a high volume of speeders. So that's the kind of the key reason behind gathering that data and having the sign up. We realize as soon as we pull the sign away, people are going to start to speed up again. We realize that the only real way to slow people down is to have RCMP on the ground, but it's a matter of trying to tailor that at effective times and effective dates to have the most impact.
Councillor Pearson? And then I would like to move on.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of comments at the end. I'm not convinced that the speed reader signs have any effect at all. I drive to Victoria, as many of you know, every morning. There's a giant speed reader sign at the end of the 4 lanes that I've been passing every day for the last number of years, and it seems like, you know, to Ms. Hall's comment, that people will see how high they can get it, and everybody's charging to the end of the 4 lanes. There's another one on the new Langford bypass. People are constantly speeding. That at the end of the 4 lanes, I've seen no law enforcement there in the last months. Yeah. On the way in this morning?
No, way home.
But I'm talking about in the morning when the speed is really at its maximum. And that speed reader that's just around the end at the former Dudney Flats, I pass sometimes 3 or 4 of them on my way to work. I see them in school zones with volunteers. Those ones seem to work when there's somebody actually standing there with a red vest on and kind of telling people to slow down. But the other ones on the highway seem to have little or no effect. But anyways, I'm not convinced that it's a valuable asset. But anyways.
Okay, then I think we need to make a resolution on this so we can move on or off of it. Mr. Derrick, before we do that?
Sorry, Your Worship, I just had one quick comment about the max speed on it. When we program the sign, we set a max speed generally where the speed reading turns off. So when I had it set in a 40 zone, I had it shut off between 55 to 60 kilometers an hour just to avoid kids doing that. And, you know, it's a thing built into the sign because people want to see how fast they can go. So we always set it 15 to 20 kilometers over the speed limit to tick off and only gather data at that point and not flash anymore.
Yeah. Just make a point, we do have the sign. We do want to see it used. So we have the asset already, and that was a decision that was made. Saanich lost one. It was stolen because it got taken off of a pole, so that's why securing it properly is important. Doesn't mean it may or may not happen here. But we have a significant amount of work to go on, and we seem to be caught up on this sign. Councillor Berger?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to remove the speed sign from the budget and
The trailer.
or the trailer, sorry, from the budget, and direct staff to talk to RCMP and see if they'd like to utilize our sign, as it's their job to monitor speed.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second it for discussion.
Seconded by Councillor Pearson for discussion. So that is that this item be removed from the budget, the trailer be removed from the budget, and staff to talk to our CMP about the use of said sign.
Yeah, and just as a quick follow-up, you guys can't see, but I'm on the RCMP webpage right now, and it says under Speed Watch that these are an excellent signs, and it says that Speed Watch is an ICB-sponsored educational program aimed at reducing and regarding incidents of speeding. The program not only provides awareness to drivers who are speeding, but also provides valuable data to RCMP and ICBC. So those are the people that should be doing it, and so that's why I've made the motion. And we have the sign, and that can be our municipal donation as to... I mean, I support it. I just don't support our staff lugging around a sign. I don't think that that's our municipal staff's job.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? I'll call the question then. All those in favor of removal? Opposed? It fails. It's a tie vote. Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Loggins, and myself are opposed, so the motion fails. So it stays... For the moment, it stays in the budget. Councillor Casper?
So I'll support some money there, but I got the message that staff is going to look at some alternative pricing and options, i.e. the cost of the trailer. That was my biggest issue, was the cost.
Yep, that's what they said.
We've had the sign for, what, 2-3 years?
3 years.
And nobody batted an eyelash. You know, like, no one said a word. No, but I'm saying no one said a word about us purchasing the signs in the first place.
The words that have happened is people want to see this sign used more within our community. That is what I hear. You guys have a sign. Can you put it here? Why can't it be there? Can you put it up here because they remember seeing it? And how come this can't be here? And on. So, okay, can we... We'll have a report come back to us. We'll see what the options are, and then we can discuss it further. But for now, it remains. Okay. Next section, please. That'll be the community projects, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item on the list is the Cairns Park Staircase and Trail. Mr. Derrick, when he was speaking earlier, was speaking of the drainage infrastructure and the preliminary design that was created in 2017. This project builds upon that. The reason we've moved forward with asking for this funding is because we've been receiving requests from Suk Elementary School. They use that area as their access to water when they go for their day trips. And so we've had calls from the Suk principal. We've also had requests from the donor's family to do improvements in that. This project is also in line with the Council's strategic plan for access to water and providing linkages. Please continue. The second item on this list is the Furwood Park Trail connection. The Furwood Park Trail provides connection to the Broomhill Trail system. However, the existing trail is on private property. The budget would allow to connect the existing trail within the park to the Furwood cul-de-sac. The possession point access to water is accessing water via staircase from Possession Point Road, designed in conjunction with the rainwater management planning for Possession Point Road.
Okay.
The Brooks Park pirate ship upgrade. A developer provided a play equipment to Brooks Park Park in the mid-1990s. Repairs have been conducted over the last 5 years. However, the level of deterioration warrants the replacement of the structure. It's estimated to be about $45,000. We would, of course, come back to council once we did a competitive bid process. The next item is the John Phillips Memorial Park bathroom. The construction of a public washroom in John Phillips Park has been identified as a priority, and interest has been expressed in options for self-cleaning washrooms. This budget is to supply and install, does not actually cover to supply and install a basic single unit. However, we will come back to council very shortly with a report about the amount of money that would be required.
Through you, Your Worship, I agree with having the washroom in John Phillips, but for our park at Ed McGregor, that washroom hasn't been open for a very long time. So what are the problems with that being opened for public use?
Your Worship, currently at Ed McGregor Park, there is a bathroom that has a flushing toilet, running hot and cold water, and heat. Every time we open that bathroom, it becomes a target for vandalism, a target for people, quote, moving into the area. And so by opening it during the day, it's being terribly vandalized, causing a great deal of cost to the District of Sault. As a result, we only open it for special events in order to protect that asset. In the interim, we do have a porta potty on that property, which I agree is not ideal. However, it is not a target to vandalism, and it provides an option for the people to use it.
And further to that, Your Worship, so what if we put a washroom similar to that here, the same thing will happen?
We did hear that when we got the report, so I think we'll have a report come back to us on the bathrooms and options, and maybe for that price we could look at more economical, like a step up from a porta potty would be a pit toilet in a few areas actually that wouldn't have that would do what it's supposed to do and not have the vandalism problems that the other washroom does. It's unfortunate, but I think the public would rather see that there's something as opposed to nothing in some areas. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. My comment was actually similar to yours and Councillor Parkinson's. I think that $100,000 for a self-cleaning toilet here is ludicrous, and I think that the pit toilets that are at Whiff and Spit and all along the Galloping Goose would be completely suffice. So I'd be in favor of going towards that way and reducing this budget down to what a pit toilet would be.
So I think when we get this back, though, because there has been a call to have another pit toilet maybe at another part of Whiff and Spit, because the only one is at almost the end of it. There's this location here, there's Sauk River Park. Do we look at doing something else in some of the other area parks or not? So this could just be a placeholder that would either, if we just did one, come in under budget, or perhaps we could do a couple in a few other areas around town for that amount. So maybe it should just say park bathrooms instead of just John Phillips Memorial. Potentially. That could be just a change.
Yeah, sorry, just to further to that, I believe when the presentation came to council, there was actually a detailed report with what the costs for each design would look like. So at our next budget deliberations, if we could, sort of look at what that number was, and then we could allocate however many pit toilets and what the necessity or where the necessity for them are.
But I think this is just to hold it in the budget so we can pass the budget, and then we can get the detailed bathroom and have like a fulsome discussion on bathrooms and locations at that time. And if we decide to do only one, then we're under budget. Or I think it's looking at a couple of them, and I don't know how old the one at Whiff and Spit is. It's been there for a long time. It may need to be replaced, and that's something that could be looked at too. Councillor Casper?
So does that include, or would that include the bathroom that was raised at the public by the public last night? That's in a state of disrepair. That hasn't been open for a donkey's age.
That's the one at McGregor Park.
But what about the other park that we have right up on?
The one at Broom Hill Park?
Yeah.
How is that washroom?
Through your worship, the one at Ed McGregor Park is in working condition, however closed and only open for events. And to my knowledge, the one at Broom Hill Park is open and functioning every day on an electronic lock system. It's maintained 3 times a week by park staff for cleaning. That one gets vandalized, but not nearly as badly because it's not nearly as homey as the other one, unfortunately.
Well, if I may, this is a public relations nightmare. Spend $200,000. I think that's what it costs, that fancy toilet at Ed McGregor, designed by an architect or somebody, and can't be used. Yeah, like it was not cheap when that thing was built, and you start to think, well, holy cow, what's happening in the community, and is there not a way where we can figure something out? Really, I think in this day and age, other communities have probably been facing the same struggles, and I've been to a lot of communities, and I've noticed that their public washrooms in park areas are open. So I don't know, maybe we have to give that some consideration too. How do we solve the problem and still provide amenities?
Yep, and that's where we'll have that report come back to us. I think it's just there is a need for this facility, and we can have that conversation, and that's where I think with the CRD and the regional parks, you're seeing that pit-style toilet installed everywhere because it just isn't attracting that problem. So, okay, moving on, please.
So the next item is
microphone, please.
Sorry. The next item is the Whiffen-Spit Park study, allocating $50,000. Whiffen-Spit Park is experiencing some significant damage each winter from wave and storm action. There's significant erosion occurring approximately 800 meters from the parking lot, so that's the section that was filled in a few decades ago. The project will evaluate the cost-benefit of shoring up and repairing the weakened areas or the feasibility of opening up and replacing it with a bridge structure. The OCP recommends, from 2010, recommends that a feasibility study of opening up Whiffen-Spit be studied and is supported by the Sauk Nation. So we're getting close to needing to make that decision before Mother Nature makes that decision for us. And by allocating this money in the budget, we will have the chance to have full public consultation and come up with some ideas of what we want that park to function in the future and how we will keep that amenity that everyone loves about Sauk open and accessible to the public.
Okay. Would that also then take into consideration parking, maybe parking hour restrictions?
It could, yeah. It could be a more holistic thing. There's a lot of questions of whether we need interpretive signage. We need to talk about parking, additional bathrooms. What the community and the neighborhood wants for Whiffen-Spit has never really been thought about holistically, and this might be the opportunity to do that.
And that would also address user interface, so sometimes there's issues with dogs off leash or
Correct.
dogs and the sea lions that are molting or whatever
Correct.
it is that they do.
So that
nesting birds.
terms of reference could be brought back to council to make sure that all of the items that you just outlined and more are considered.
Okay.
And that we can move forward from there.
Great. Okay. Councillor Pearson?
Yes, through the chair to Director of Park Services. So I'm always leery when I see the word study. So the $50,000, how do you envision the $50,000 being spent in a form of a study? Additional staff time? I mean, a quick breakdown, not a huge. Thank you.
Through your worship, I believe this would be something that a consultant would be hired to do that public consultation and just lead the community through the question and answer process. And staff will provide some support, but it would very much be led by a consultant. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, it does. And like I say, $50,000 is a lot of money to put to our study, but I see it's funded partly by a grant. I think there's some. I would have some more questions as we went towards the study. What it would. I guess I understand what the benefit would be. I just trying to understand is what we would spend the money on, and you've answered that question with the consultant. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Casper, please.
Yeah. The only thing I'm concerned about is that if we're going to spend $50,000, then we should be partnering with Sauk First Nation on this, because I think all of us around this table have heard, I've heard it from the chief on a number of occasions, that the end of Whiffen-Spit is the island, and that the spit should clearly be opened up. It's been said to me. I don't know if everybody around the table agrees with those sentiments. And if that's the case, then I would like to approach this in a totally different way. Because here we are, as a municipality, funding something that, yes, it would be of a benefit, but if it's an issue that is to recognize Indigenous rights and opportunities for First Nations and flushing of the basin, which is what I've been advised the rationale of opening up the spit is for, then I think we're talking about a broader issue than just spending $50,000 on a study. Because it should be involving fisheries. It should be involving other people. And, is that $25,000? Is that taxpayer funded? Taxes? And the rest is grants? I'm prepared to kick in half that amount, and then let's go to the table, go to fisheries, go to whoever, and say, look, this is an issue that's been raised with us, and to bring in the other partners. $25,000, if we can fund it from our own grant source or another source of funding, that's fine. I'd sooner see that $25,000 going into other issues that are facing the community, because it may be totally out of our hands. Decisions may end up being made that somebody out there will say, hey, the spit is creating problems for the basin and it should be opened up. And we might not have any say about that whatsoever.
So perhaps when we have this report come back, it can include those particular items, and then we can look at what our options are at the time?
Yes, yeah, that's fine, but I just have a concern about us spending $50,000 on something that may end up being totally out of our hands and out of our control.
And I hear you, Councillor Casper, and that's where the sort of terms and the like are going to come back to council when we do that. And then we can ensure that what the points that you've captured, or user interface, or other parking and the like, can all have proper input at that time, and when we develop that, and we can set it from there.
But we need answers.
Well, yeah, but we won't have them tonight. We need to get there. Yes, absolutely. Okay, then there's the Seniors Youth Center. That's just the ongoing contribution. We talked about that yesterday. Councillor Loggins?
I brought this up before and was told this was the right time to bring it up again, but the plebiscite was kind of what sparked this fund, and I think the name of the line item has caused a bit of confusion with some folks in the community, and I would like to see it changed to Community Center instead of Seniors and Youth Center. We have a community hall.
Councillor Parkinson?
Through you, Your Worship, I'm not too sure whether that would be confusing to the public as well. Community hall, community center.
I'll make the motion that the line item gets changed to community center facilities as part of the.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Berger, and that is that the line item be changed to community center facilities.
The discussion in the community center committee included people from the community hall, also arts groups and seniors, youth, many different other groups. And the community hall could also fall under this. So I don't think it would be confusing. It might be nice. I know there are some councillors who think that this should go towards the community hall, and it just encompasses a few other things instead of directing it specifically to seniors and youth only.
But if I may, this is the last year, and I think this started 5 years ago. So it actually didn't result from the plebiscite. Like, there was a resolution at the time 5 years ago that every year we contribute $50,000 in, and it's been 5 years. And then the plebiscite sort of reinforced the direction that we were going in. So that's why this particular fund had that name at the time. It wasn't a response of it actually predates that, if I'm not mistaken. I'm seeing nods. Okay, Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. They kind of do go part and parcel, because the $50,000 was to help offset space for initially where it came about was space for the seniors to rent when they lost their home and they were here at the fire hall and so on and so on. And then that triggered the question in the plebiscite to, do we need more community spaces? And through that conversation, it wasn't isolated just to a community or senior center. It was more, do we need community spaces? And that's where the topic of refurbishment of the community hall, refurbishment of the Legion, possible new space. So I support the motion just because it grew from there and it became community space for all.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, the former mayor and myself actually had discussions with the representatives of the seniors, and we were inundated with requests and a lot of concerns that were raised by the seniors community that something should be done. So we felt that at the time that this would be an opportunity to set aside funding for the seniors in order for them to find some space, whether it was space in conjunction with another building, another project, or standalone. We didn't want to get involved in that process. By the time it came to the council table as a recommendation, the term youth center or youth was added to it, so that it was felt that we should try to look at this in a broader approach, so that if there is an opportunity for both a standalone facility or something that's in conjunction with the existing community hall or any other building, that our share of financial contribution would be to the benefit of seniors and youth. And we set up a special fund for that, and it does predate that plebiscite. So it was very supportive. We had full support from the seniors, and they have been operating on that basis, getting, well, at the end of this year, it'll be 5 years. So that's why it's the way it is. And I can appreciate the motion, but I think it would send a totally different message. It would actually send a negative message. And I'm not prepared to accommodate that or support that, because I think we've been working well with the seniors. We actually had a presentation from them not that long ago in their proposal, wherever it's to be located, whether it's on Lot A or at any other building, that this is a commitment in the package that the District of Sauk is going to come with to assist them in accommodating their needs in conjunction with the needs of our youth in the community. So that's the rationale. I won't be supporting the motion, with the greatest respect to my colleagues, because, it's...
I'll just add, we have recently given an agreement in principle to the seniors on that project. Councillor Loggins?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, we did get the great presentation from the seniors, and we did have that agreement in principle. They're not being discluded from this. We're being more inclusive. And it's, if you recall any of the information that came out of the Community Center Committee, it was, there was a chart in one of the packages that was created by that committee, or by, I guess I wrote it actually, for the Community Health Network ages ago. But what the youth want, and they're listed here, so what the youth wanted in the community was not a youth center, but a variety of things that included seniors and youth and arts and music and theater and everything. So from the youth perspective, that would, having something that was a bit more all-encompassing would help. And then, as Councillor Berger suggested, there's also ways to incorporate the seniors and the youth and other people and other in the community hall and in the Legion and other things. So I think having a broader perspective on this and not just restricting it to these two groups, because these two groups are the people who are kind of going to be using these facilities, but we also need to make sure it's available for families and other people who are in the community center committee, to be quite frank.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pearson, and then perhaps we can call the question and move on, please.
I agree with everything that's going on around the table. I think maybe there's a soft is that we could add just a word, seniors youth public center, or family center. Just add a third word. Well, no, I think the risk is that if we say community center, the inference is that community hall. Some people may be offended, and I think if we don't do a good communication on the change, we run the risk of people asking a lot of questions. So I think it's a change management issue. I'm not sure at budget deliberation. I think there's an opportunity to change the name, and I agree with Councillor Loggins. I think that it needs to be inclusive. I'm just not sure that I'm supportive of the word community in there. I get what you mean, but obviously not.
Okay, so it's community center facilities would be what the proposed name change is. Okay, so there is a motion that's been moved and it's been seconded. So I would like to call the question on that. All those in favor of the change? Opposed? Councillor Pearson, Casper, and Parkinson opposed. So the motion ties. I'm in favor of it, so it's defeated. So the current language stays. Okay, moving on. Actually, I'll just maybe just mindful of the time. Does anyone, Councillor Berger?
Yeah, sorry, I just have one final comment in the community projects, and I forgot to bring it up when we were talking about the John Phillips washroom. The note that I had to myself was that if we decreased this budget to what a pit toilet would be for that location, I was going to ask that we move the proposed memorial wall for 2019 into this year's budget.
Okay, that the only thing might be the timing, because the SPA committee has it under them. They're just forming. They have community in blooms.
I forgot that we passed it to SPA.
So
sorry.
I think it's likely that they might come up with an idea, and that's where it would fall into next year timing wise. Okay. The other comments that I hear sometimes is that Ed McGregor, a lot of the different components are starting to show wear, like the mosaic, the glass in the walls and the like. So it's not really capital, but it's improvements. So where can those sorts of things be addressed? Like all the glass and just a lot of the interesting features there have really taken a bit of a beating over the years. Is that all in next year's, or some of it can be done through maintenance?
Your Worship, we can do some of those things through maintenance. Currently, the mosaic, we're trying to find somebody who can restore that thing. And then we will come back to you and ask for, if necessary, if we can't accommodate it within our maintenance budgets, come back to council for that. Further to that, the welcome sign for Ed McGregor Park does need refurbishment, and we're looking into getting quotes to that, which can be accommodated within the maintenance budget.
So a lot of that's in the works then, and then the larger capital would be in the coming years.
Correct.
The other query I get is that there's $400,000 sitting in a Sun River specific fund for enhancements to the district-owned property there, and some residents have asked as to how can that actually be put into play. So what would be that process to actually have some sort of consultation occur there, seeing that the funds are sitting there? To our acting CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. That one we need to be careful with, of course, because there is covenants on properties related to that playing field reserve.
Yeah.
So it would need to be a full public process to, it's meant for a playing field in the area there. There's only really a couple of options for the location of that, I believe, and whether the school. I think it needs to be considered with what the plans are with the school and how they're moving along and all that.
So you can't. It has to be specific to a playing field. It can't just be like a grassy park to play in.
Your Worship, we'd have to read through the actual legal agreement, but it is a legal agreement, and it is for a playing field. So
I see.
Yeah.
Possible, I wouldn't mind someone just dredging up a copy of that for me. I think that might just help answer some queries that I'm getting. I think there's a sentiment that it's for park enhancements, and so I think that would be helpful. Okay, on the section, Councillor Pearson.
Yes, through the chair to Ms. Hooper, thank you for your presentation. I was hoping that we could get, and thank you, Mayor Tate, for bringing up the restoration of the mural. I was hoping that we could somehow get that once and for all dealt with, because Mr. Reverend Alan Tissick he's collected all the pieces and he's very interested. So somehow, if we could squeeze that in there somewhere, I'd greatly appreciate it. So I hope there's enough room in that budget there somewhere, or something of that. I would support something being done there. So thank you.
We look forward to that report. Okay, if I could ask the public then if there's any comments or questions on the community project area. We'll talk about Parks Department equipment next, but just on these specific items.
Ellen Lors, 5526 Souk Road. I was disappointed that you didn't support the motion that Councillor Loggins had, because I believe it is a community centre facility, and it is a community. And when we had the community centre group, we spent a lot of time with the seniors and a lot of time with the youth. There was a lot of input with volunteers. So I know it's mute now because you've already had your motion, but it definitely should be community center. Okay. There was another thing on. What page was that on?
7.
7. Thank you.
There is still going to be more opportunity to comment, Ms. Lures, because once we get through everything, we still have to go through the readings of the bylaws too. Like there's still...
Wait, I can't see it on there. That's okay.
Okay. We're good. Okay, can we move to parks equipment, please?
The item proposes $70,000 for Parks Department equipment, The item includes $70,000 for Parks Department equipment, which includes the acquisition of a new long box truck and with a crew cab to accommodate and add versatility to existing fleet for maintenance and garbage collection. It also includes an additional set of mowers, a ride-on and push mower, and power tools to increase our capacity within the Parks Department. It also provides redundancies for the larger Gravely mowing machine, which if it goes down, we have no way to mow, and as grass grows, it's impossible to get ahead of these things. And also, it provides us a small budget for loss due to theft, and I know that caused a little bit of excitement last night. We do lose power equipment, even if we are securing them in the trucks. There are vandals who come in when our backs are turned. We lost a whippersnipper, a commercial whippersnipper, and a commercial blower last year. We do our best to chain, but still we, as are many landscape companies, targets for vandalism and theft.
Okay, yeah, we did have quite a bit of conversation about this. Councillor Parkinson?
Through your worship, what does the existing fleet consist of?
Currently, Your Worship, the existing fleet consists of a number of vehicles that we essentially borrowed from other departments. We have one truck known as Salty that came from the engineering department.
So is it yours now or theirs?
It's ours. So we acquired that one. We acquired the plow truck also from the engineering via the fire department. And last year we purchased a heavy-duty dumping truck, a 2017 Ford, about mid-year, which is able to pull the tractor and the larger trailers that we need the towing capacity. So where this issue comes is we don't have a really versatile truck. We have the Salter and the plow trucks. But we need a long box truck so that when we do our garbage runs, we don't have to do 2 runs. We can actually accommodate it in one of these larger trucks. The large Ford that we purchased is just that, very large, and therefore not easy to get garbage up into safely, and it wasn't actually purchased for that purpose.
Thank you.
Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. I, too, was a bit concerned about an addition to the fleet. I thought we had 2 trucks, but now hearing that we have 3 trucks and 2 full-time people, our fleet is going to outnumber our people, and that doesn't make any sense to me. With all due respect, I have a tough time with that. yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. I know that we hire one seasonal person, but then we still have a truck per person. So
We do have postings for all the auxiliary staff that are coming in, though, as well, that we've talked about previously.
auxiliary staff within Parks Department, which I thought was one seasonal parks person.
Through your worship, when the Parks Department was brought on or approved in 2016, there was authorization for 2 full-time staff, you're correct, and then there was 2 auxiliary staff members as well. So there are 4, not full-time staff, but 4 staff members that are on staff during the summer and peak season. And we did post, and this is something that's coming up in the operational budget, for an on-call as needed temporary parks positions, so that we don't actually commit to 40 hours a week. We just call a few people in when the grass is really growing or when we need to do seasonal adornments. So though that's in the operational budget, this is something that would accommodate existing staff that was approved in 2016, 2017.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay.
So I'm just going to add my quick comment. I'm not in favor of purchasing a truck right now. I think that our Parks Department, we brought it in-house because we had 6 different contracts, and it was a ways of sort of, it wasn't based on cost saving, but it was a way of bringing it in-house so we could get all the things not done that we needed. I think the fact that we have 3 trucks right now, for me, that's, and I'm sure staff would disagree with me, and I'm sorry, but with all due respect, I think that looking at our budget and how this Parks Department budget is really, really growing, at the very beginning of our budget deliberations, I said, for me, I'm going to be, quite strict with this as far as needs and wants. And I see our needs in this community as hard infrastructure, sewer and roads. So I'm going to be against this truck. Thank you.
Okay, so we would need a motion then to have it removed.
So I'll make a motion that we do not purchase an extra truck for the Parks Department in this capital budget cycle.
There's a mover and a seconder. Any discussion? Councillor Casper?
So I could appreciate it if we were eliminating some of the vehicles and this was a replacement. The rationale that was in a document here, and what was stated last night or something, so that we could have 4 people in one vehicle. I just have a problem with 4 people in one vehicle, because it's not like you're going out into the remote bush and you're going to be there all day, and things happen, and I don't want to see us in a position where we decide, we're going to just have 4 people go to this job and 4 people go to that job, and then, it's just the approach. Maybe once we get the dust settled as to what our actual needs are and the amount of equipment that we need based on the number of staff we have, then sure, if I'm around here next year or whoever, then perhaps it's something that could be entertained. And I'm not wholly against the idea of upgrading equipment, but to me, it's got to be clearly demonstrated that things are falling apart, and right now that's not the case. The other thing is that $70,000 is a heck of a bill, considering the fact that last year I think we spent, and I got the actuals here, we spent 150-something thousand in equipment, right? And that's a lot of money. So in 2 years, when, and I got to look at it 2 years ago, when we made the conscious decision, we actually did a business plan on doing the transition from the contracts that were out in the private sector to bringing it in-house. And that's in the back of my brain as to what we were deciding to do in the rationale. I was the one who brought it to the table, who fully supported the concept of bringing things in-house. And I did that on the basis that, number one, it was going to remain the same as far as cost, and that, yes, there was a rationale that we had to buy some equipment. And in the long run, I still stand by that. But as Councillor Berger has said, that things are perhaps escalating at a little too high a rate right now. So, I appreciate all the work and effort staff have gone into this, but I just can't support the purchase.
Okay, there's just a comment back from Mr. Howard, I believe. Then I'll go to Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to pick up on a few points that we're talking about. First of all, the Parks Department, we did inherit 2 older trucks, one from the fire department. I believe the other one was an old engineering vehicle. We have had maintenance problems with the old engineering vehicles. The old engineering vehicle, it's getting a little long in the tooth, and it does require care and a significant amount of maintenance. The other issue is if we're bringing in the other 2 auxiliary workers on an if and when basis or as needed basis, we need to be able to deploy them in an area or in areas where they can work, and just having enough vehicles to do the garbage and things like that. We have a listing here, and I didn't put it in the package I'm not too sure why I didn't, but since we brought parks in-house, we have several other commitments that we have to look at that we're responsible for doing. And I'd just like to touch quickly on, I know we're tight for time, but just a couple of subdivision activity. We have rainwater maintenance ponds or rainwater detention ponds that we're responsible for the maintenance and the maintenance of the landscaping. We have several subdivisions that have numerous street trees we're responsible for. We have numerous playgrounds that we're responsible for. We have the town center roundabout we're responsible for. The town center medians, the transit shelters, the garbage, as I alluded to, the boat launch overflow parking, and I'm sure that we're going to be addressing that later on in the budget deliberations anyway. John Phillips Memorial Park, Goodmere Horn Road connection, and all the other trailways that we maintain. So, yes, it is growing, as Councillor Casper alluded to, but it's growing fairly quickly, and it's maintenance that we have to do. And just another support for the truck. I'm not too sure if we would need $70,000 for a truck. I believe that's a little bit on the high side. But hopefully if Council sees fit to have something in the budget, it would certainly help our endeavor to keep up with all the work that the Parks Department has to do. Thank you.
And I think those are all excellent responsibilities to have. Like, I don't want to be like, oh, now we're street trees. Oh my God, we have to maintain them. This makes the community attractive. You clear out how many to build a subdivision, and then you put in a fraction of what was taken. And the trail connections, all those things are well used and appreciated by our residents. Councillor Pearson?
Yes, and I think for me, as I've heard everybody around the table, is I think that when you're looking at a small municipality like we have, and then you see a $70,000 ask in a small department, the automatic alarm bells go off while the Parks Department is asking for a $70,000 truck. I don't have problems supporting equipment that's needed to run our municipality, but I think you have to look at it at a bigger picture. So what else can we do with this truck or this equipment? And maybe it's 70, maybe it's 60, or maybe it's less. But I think that you have to say, as a municipality, you have to look at, okay, what else can we do with that truck? What other departments are in there? Like what, we say, okay, it's the Parks Department's truck. Then somebody else is going to come along and ask for another truck. And I get that sense when I see it isolated in a budget. So I have no issue looking at our overall equipment need and coming up with a plan with that. So I'm cautious in saying that I support equipment and the right equipment and safe equipment and replacement equipment along the way. But I think it has to be globally looked at across the entire district, not in isolation to the Parks Department. And I think that's probably where my alarm bells went off when I see that. Thank you.
So I won't be supporting the motion. I think the truck needs to remain. We're hearing about that they have the old engineering truck, the old fire department truck that's used for plowing and salting. We have added considerable green space to our communities. It's not just maintaining the additional parks, and even then, when they were contracted out, there were complaints on how well they were maintained at the time. I think our staff do an excellent job in this area, and we continue to add green space that's enjoyed by our residents. And so We also hear about the amount of garbage that's being dumped in our parks that our staff have to go and lift out. The wheelbarrows full that comes off, that's ditched onto our boardwalk at night by perhaps liveaboard vessels and the like. All of this is being picked up and cleaned up, and it's being used in a vehicle that wasn't acquired for that purpose. It was a fire department truck that was used to salt and plow and the like. So I think the truck is necessary, so I think it should stay. So the motion, though, is to remove, so I won't be supporting that motion. In the essence of time, I'm going to call the question. So all those in favor of removing? Opposed? So Councillor Parkinson, Loggins, myself, and Pearson oppose. So the motion fails. The truck stays. Mr. Blackhall.
Thank you, Your Worship. I notice we're just running to the end of the time. I'd like to see if Council would entertain at this time scheduling another meeting for next week, perhaps next Wednesday night.
Yes, so thank you. I think we managed to get through both engineering and parks, so thank you to both the staff members. Mr. Skidmore, thank you for being here, and I'm sorry that we didn't hear from you, but we have another person in the room, so that's always great during budget deliberations. We have Monday as regular council and fire department, so staff is looking at Wednesday for another special meeting. Councillor Parkinson?
Through Your Worship, can we stay at the extra 15 minutes so that Mr. Skidmore can answer any questions that we have? We talked to him yesterday.
We did.
And almost finished. Asked him to come back today. He was supposed to talk ahead of time. He was put to the end, so he should be able to speak, so he doesn't have to come back again.
Yep, I agree with that. We did talk about the sewer at length yesterday, and then we took it all home to contemplate, so I'm comfortable extending the time so that we can at least get a bit more on track. I do think, though, that we still need to have a special meeting because there was a concern raised to me by our corporate officer that with the timelines to pass the readings of the budget, depending on how Monday night goes, we're getting close to our cutoff times to have the budget, all the readings done, and the appropriate notice. So are those here available next Wednesday? So I no, I don't know about Councillor Ray. Yes, Councillor Parkinson is a go for Wednesday. Not. Let me just check. That would be remaining Monday the 26th. Then there's the option of the 27th, the Tuesday. We're here during, yep. Okay, do we have staff for Tuesday night?
Your Worship, we could.
I don't know what that means.
We can arrange to make sure there will be some staff here that evening.
I think I don't like going into a meeting knowing that only 4 councillors are good to go because then we've lost quorum because of that. So I think just safety and having a few more numbers, I think it'll have to be Tuesday. And if Monday really drags out, we're going to have to look at booking Wednesday anyway at that time, depending on how we go. So I think let's focus on the Tuesday. Okay? Tuesday, 7 o'clock for the special meeting to go out. And then now, I'm sorry, I don't. Okay. Do we have public comment on parks equipment, or can we move to our sewer presentation? Okay, sewer presentation, please. Mr. Skidmore, Council had asked for a bit more information. Maybe if you could go through your presentation, please, and then we can hopefully cover that piece off. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Blackhall was going to go through the sewer fund revenues first, and then go through the operating, if that's okay.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. The sewer. So we're basically going to go. We went through sewer capital last evening. If Council has any remaining questions from that presentation, they can. Mr. Skidmore can answer them tonight, or we can have them at another evening, but tonight would be the best time to address them. We're going to go through the operating budget right now. So starting with the revenues, the parcel tax is based on the based on the number of parcels in the area, and as we discussed last night, it's we do have a growth rate built into this. That it's right now it's close to 3%, but we've got it in 2.5% for the purposes of a budget. We added a bit of extra revenue in there to balance with the needs of the capital program, as we discussed last night. The sewer generation charge brings in approximately almost $400,000, and then we have within the revenues, any DCCs that are received for wastewater come in as a revenue and out as an expense into the reserve fund. Sewer serviceability fees, the standard work that Stantec does for us. The borrowing, so if we're going to be borrowing for the capital program, that's a source of funds and up in the revenue section. And so far, as it stands right now, the budget has a planned borrowing of $750. I'll speak to that a bit more in a minute. Transfer from the reserve fund, so that's another source of revenue. So the reserve fund will open 2018 with approximately $900,000 in it. The reserves are all listed at the back of the budget document with their ins and outs for the whole 5 years. And then a transfer from the DCC reserve. So we get the money from DCs goes into the reserve, and then council had approved that the DCC monies be used to pay the principal on the debt. So that's the $295,000. So that's the revenues. The other number, the amortization, is just about to balance the fact that we have to include amortization down in the expenses. It's not a cash item. It doesn't impact the need to raise the revenues. So if council has any questions on the revenue side, I could answer them.
Councillor Casper?
Yeah, so in your proposal, it's proposed to raise the parcel tax. Why is it not proposed to also raise the sewer generation charges? Because if you know, it's unfair to all the other people who contribute, that one other sector of the community doesn't face the same increases. So could we get an answer?
Yep, that's a good question, through your worship. And we can certainly spread it in some means. That's just basically the amount of additional revenue, unless we increase the borrowings. The $750,000 for the borrowing is, if you remember from the capital page we looked at last night, that was for the centrifuge/biosolids project, and perhaps Mr. Skidmore can speak to that a bit again in a few minutes. But there was also another larger item in there, and if we added the two together, that'd be closer to a $1 million borrowing, which over a longer period of time would be less of an annual cost, not resulting in the need to increase any of the parcel taxes. So it's where, you know, getting to where does council have their comfort level on the amount of borrowings we want to do. This projection is over 5 years as well, the 750, so that we could do it without having to go through all the extra rigors of a borrowing. If we keep it to 5 years, we just need council approval and we can go to MFA. If we do it to 10 years, we're going to need an alternative approval process at the minimum, which will stretch out things, obviously. It would reduce the annual cost, but it would maybe increase the interest offsetting that. But anyway, that's something that we would be looking for council's feedback on.
So if I just may add to that, I think you gathered last night that in my opinion, I guess, the sentiments around this table was that we all agreed that the parcel tax rates, the sewer generation rates, were kept artificially low, did not keep up with the badly needed capital infrastructure component of our existing system. Not expanding the system, but just to deal with what we've got. And I think that in order to, you know, do the right thing for the operation As far as the capital works, that's going to ensure the users that everything's going to be running, and it's not going to break down. And I think that from a political side, because we're the ones who are going to take the heat. Let's not kid ourselves. To tell people, look, it costs money to upgrade the system, and in many respects, certain things perhaps should have been done differently in the past, but didn't happen.
It doesn't matter.
It's there, right? It's going to happen. So I'm in favor of increasing the parcel tax, but also increasing it to deal with the issue that Councillor Berger raised as far as our DCC fund, and to stop using that money, to get rid of it. And I know Councillor Pearson raised that too. But is it possible to increase the sewer generation charge in the same proportionate amount as the parcel tax? So instead of just getting $90-something thousand, that we could actually get more money? Because that money is going to go back into the system. Does that make sense?
It does. No, I would agree that it shouldn't just be the parcel tax. I think any sewer-related charge that is going to put revenue in, they all need to increase accordingly. I would agree with that.
Yep. Thanks, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Casper. I just put this in there to start the conversation and trying to see where Council wanted to go with it. And certainly I'll allocate it accordingly in the next version that comes back to you on Tuesday, I guess. Didn't make it into Monday's agenda unless it comes in as a supplemental. But and then to Councillor Pearson's question from last night, we looked at the remaining 9 years on the debt. The cost of that debt servicing is $450,000 a year, $300 roughly for the principal. The rest is interest. But if you just focused on the principal portion for those remaining 9 years, you'd be looking at about an $80 lift per parcel. So if we spread that between the parcel and I'll figure out the dollar impact of that, but proportionate accordingly between the two, parcel tax and the sewer generation fee. If that's what Council wishes, that would be the cost of that.
Councillor Pearson?
And through the chair to our acting CEO, thank you for getting that sort of down, because I think that's going to be important for us to talk about that actual number, because in the background we have some other issues that that Councillor Casper raised last night, which is the underfunding from the very onset of this, and that's looming out there, and we've had those discussions around some of the people that bought into the system that kept the other rates artificially low, but now we're going to face that bigger issue of how do we rectify that situation. So, okay, thank you for that, and I look forward to that discussion as we finalize this piece of it. Thank you.
Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to the Director of Finance, because I, as you all know, have heard me say that for the last however many years, that paying out of the DCC Water Reserve Fund, Wastewater Reserve Fund, that's up in 3 years. So we're going to be shy $295,000 every single year for the next. We owe 9, and we've only got 3 years left of that money. So we need to get down to finding out what's going to work so we can offset that and not be stuck, because it's a huge problem. So thank you for that. I was sorry I wasn't here last night, so I did miss some of the conversation. I started watching it, and I'm not quite done, so I'll reserve the rest of my comments for Tuesday. Thank you.
So thank you, Your Worship. I think what I've heard from Council is they would like that built into the next version of the budget.
Yep.
And at the amount that would cover the principal of the debt for the 9 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, we should have a motion to that, I think. Yep. So if that motion's moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Pearson, it's that
staff will calculate the amount of the increase to the parcel tax and the sewer generation charge needed to cover the principal on the debt, on the remaining debt.
Okay. Councillor Pearson on the motion. Good with the motion? Can I call the question on the motion then? All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, then thank you again. And now I'll pass it over to Mr. Skidmore as our sewer expert, and thank him very much for all his hard works and efforts down the plant. He does a great job down there, and I'd like him to take over. Pardon
He
me?
does. Sorry, Mr. Skidmore, but Councillor Pearson has a quick
Oh,
question.
sorry.
Quickly, please.
Just one question for the acting CEO, Director of Finance. Is the requirement under the Local Government Act to repay that fund where we're borrowing the money from? Eventually, because we're drawing down that DCC fund. Do we ever have to pay that back? No?
I don't believe we do, and I will confirm that and come back with that answer at the next meeting, but I believe Council was in their authority to do what the plan was with the monies at the time. It's a way to finance the construction. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Casper will answer that in
So
this.
the answer we were given by our lawyers and by the province, because the sewer treatment plant was listed as a DCC project, then that was the rationale as to how we could use those monies.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Skidmore, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Going through the operating expenses, the first line, as you see, is our salaries. That's a contractual agreement with the union for our salaries. The next line is the benefits. That's an estimated amount of benefits for the year for each employee. We do have 3 operators and an admin person in the department. Operating overtime or operator overtime, that's an estimate, and it all depends on weather events that happen. As you know, we had trees come down on Phillips Road and took out our lift station for the night, so it's all based on that. So it's an estimate. We can go over, we can be under. It all depends on weather events on that. So the total being the 551. Operating cost under contractors and consultants. It's a rather broad number that I use in that one, but I can tell you that under the contractor consultants, we have things such as Emery Electric to do our electrical work at about $75,000. McRae's, who do our back truck, we estimate around $30,000 a year for emergencies and for repairs and maintenance. Our disposal trucking, we're looking at about $48,000 in trucking. We're looking at about $110,000 in tipping fees over the year. And our testing, so our lab work that we do outside of our own lab that's required by legislation, we're at about $6,000. And our SCADA contract is about $15,000 plus an extra $5,000 that we do for extras in case we have extra work that needs to be done on that. That leaves about $61,000 to cover operating expenses such as our coveralls, our office cleaning, concrete cutting when we need to put Brooks boxes in driveways, safety line monitoring for the guys that are working alone at night, backflow preventer testing, garbage recycling, that kind of thing. Right?
So if I may, since I asked for the information, thank you very much. And that puts it in perspective because, you know, when you go back in history, it's always good to see what it was then, and then you can see, are you making improvements here, and then are there different ways where we can do business? So I really appreciate the information. And then, you know, but I think hopefully that during our next budget deliberation or in the future, that some form of an addendum or breakdown, and you don't have to name the companies, but in those different categories, because it really adds a different insight as to that block of dollars. So thank you very much.
Just to go on further, just a little note, my budget, I did a rough estimate of what our contractual contract would have been, and we're still, from this contract to what it would have been, going, if we would have stayed contractual, it would have been about $100,000 more just on the operations. So just depending on what the CPI index and stuff had happened throughout the year. So it gives you an idea that we're still lower operating costs today. After the contract consultants, we have our materials and supplies. These are parts and supplies that we need on hand at all times. And it's gone up, last year I believe it was $49,000, or pardon me, $48,000, so I've only added an extra $1,000 because we were very close on budget there. Freight and courier is, our serviceability studies is the serviceability studies we do on each site that is coming on board that our engineers do for us. Freight and courier, as you know, for shipping back and forth on supplies. Our chemicals include our polymer that we use down at the plant, odor control chemicals that we use, both biomax and carbon, and any extra chemicals that we may need during the year if we have problems with settling or anything like that. The vehicle insurance covers the cost of our 2 vehicles that we have down at the plant. The licenses include the EOCP licenses we need to operate our facilities, including the Electrical Safety Authority permits and MOE permits that we require. The hydro charges, they keep our pumps running for us, so we have to pay them as they come in, and we've added an increase of 3.5% from last year as the hydro rates are supposed to be going up. Our CRD water charges that we have for our plant and lift stations. Our telephone and data lines that we have, each lift station has 2 lines, one for a phone line for calling out in emergencies, another is for our SCADA system. So it's not cheap. We have looked at different options, and we've actually been able to lower our telephone costs. Stationery supplies, printing, all that kind of stuff that we do down in the office there, including the office machine and furniture. Software is our basic equipment of software that we need to upgrade at times. Computer charges has helped the cost for our IT department. Vehicle fuel, basically the cost of running those 2 vehicles. Vehicle maintenance and expenses, make sure we have our oil changes and stuff done. Memberships and professional dues. For the operators, we have to maintain their CEUs under the training and tuition, and the dues that we have to pay for the Environmental Operator Certification Program and the BCWWA. And the travel is for the operators to be able to go to the different courses that are required throughout the province to be able to maintain their CEUs. That's basically it for the operations. The rest is stuff that comes out of Mr. Blackhall's part.
Thank you, Mr. Skidmore. Mr. Blackhall?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Skidmore, for the presentation. It's really good to have someone with a lot of knowledge and expertise with us, so totally appreciate it. We're very lucky. Allocated admin costs. So this, we got to make sure that the admin time that's going into the sewer system is being recovered from the sewer system, because it's not fair for property tax payers to be bearing that cost. So we're trying to track how much of our admin time is going into this. The finance, I mentioned how the finance one works. I track it by invoice that comes in, and we're actually at now, after a full year, at just over 23, almost 24%, so it's just rounded up to 25. But that's actual number of invoices processed, and you can imagine how many hands touch an invoice and all that before it actually results in a check that mayor signs. So anyway, same with IT. Our IT department and GIS department work very closely with the wastewater team. When you see the presentation on the financial department where GIS is, I'll show you all the assets, the infrastructure map, our asset management software, all that stuff. The wastewater team is really integrated and using the system and the software. They go out in the field and they can actually take pictures and enter it right into the system, the data, and it uploads to the map, and it's quite the neat process. So that's why there's some time of those guys in there. And then there is obviously a little bit of corporate services time and every other department, but very little, so that's 12%. And we can certainly look at refining these numbers as we go forward. The audit, sewer fund is a very big portion of the financial statements and the time the auditors spend on the audit and us preparing the financial statements and all journal entries, et cetera. And it is our second biggest asset we have on our books. and it's a large portion of the overall cost of the insurance for the organization. So that's how the costs get allocated. Again, if council wishes a different method of allocation, we can look at that too. So, and it's basically, though, if say it went down from whatever it is right now, $395,000, if it dropped down to say $200,000, that difference has to be made up on the other side. So it's either an increase to a property taxes, or if we had operating surplus to use, that sort of thing. I've gone through, and for Councillor Berger's benefit from last night, mentioned that I go through that budget to actual report that you guys have copies of, and I make sure any amount that we're not double taxing, we're not taxing people for something that we didn't fully spend this year or didn't do at all, and that gets brought into operating to help reduce the tax impact for the year. So that in this budget is just over $200,000 of impact on the operating side. And then the other operating costs within the sewer fund, we do need to do an update to the DCC bylaw. It's time. It's been in the budget and then keeps getting moved, but we need to do it for the roads and we need to do it for the sewer. Asset management and other plans, so we do apply for grants with all the asset management work. We did get one on the asset management flow monitoring work that we're going to do. We got a $15,000 grant for that. There's lots of good grant opportunities in there, but it requires us to actually have a good asset management strategy and policy in place too. So we've got to do a bit of that work. The rest of it is just the transfers and the amortization, so that's about it. The sewer debt, we mentioned the debt that expires in 2026. That's the first two lines there, the 295 and 154. And the other one would be if we do borrow for the capital, the $750,000 borrowing, that would be the amount needed to service that debt in the first year. And then you can see it goes up as you get more of a full year of the debt term in those years. And then the capital projects we talked about last night, and Mr. Skidmore provided the breakout of those capital projects. So, and then I just provided a reconciliation at the bottom so that if you try to tie in the total number of expenditures into where it shows up on the sewer operations line in the consolidated budget page, that's how you get there. So happy to answer any questions.
No, it's pretty to the point, so thank you very much for that. Questions from members of council? Questions from member or comments from members of the public on the sewer presentation?
John Reynolds.
Sorry, sir, can you turn on the mic? Could you turn on the microphone? Thank you, sir.
Thanks. John Reynolds, 2029 Kaltassin Road. Your Worship, I see in the chemical line here $102,000. What was the chemical costs for 2017?
We actually have that somewhere. 45,337. So maybe if we could have an explanation on the difference, please.
Through your Worship, the biomax at Sun River was not being used at the time, and we were still having odor issues. So we've started using the biomax now again. So the tank's been filled. So we got to make sure that we can pay that back.
So is this the case then that last year we didn't have the full amount of chemicals expected used, and that's why it's so significantly different?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
The tank it was empty. It was actually full for the past been over 5 years. It's been drained off, from my understanding.
Okay, so that's now been fixed.
It's been filled now.
Okay.
Or it's going to be filled completely.
And that's the one on Phillips Road. Okay,
That's
I know which one that is. Okay, thank you.
So that's the 2.5 times the chemical costs?
Is there also an increase in the amount of chemicals or other stations? Is that anticipated?
The cost of polymer has increased. That's why in the capital project we're actually looking at a bulk system. The drums are actually costing us more. We're also having to remove the drums. We had a large stockpile left from the previous contractor on site, so we have to remove them also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if, and this might be backtracking to page 80 of 85, which was your centrifuge. It was mentioned that you are presently moving 450-pound drums around, and you're going to totes. Can you explain how these totes are going to be moved around?
Through your worship, the totes will actually be in place. The truck will deliver it from tote into it, so it'll be a pump system directly into our storage tank.
So you don't actually have to move them?
That's correct.
Okay.
It won't be manhandled. It'll be all done by pump.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Skidmore.
Your worship, is the supplier going to take these totes back at no costs?
Do we get a deposit returned to us?
Through your worship, that's stuff we're going to have to look at as to depending on if we're going to stay with a liquid polymer or if we go to a dry chemical polymer as opposed to the liquid.
Okay.
We'll know that when we do the assessment down there, and we'll bring that project back to you for you guys to review at that time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Skidmore.
Okay, thank you. Your worship, last night it was alluded to that someone within the district was going to be monitoring the remediation quality and any new construction. Who's going to be responsible for those inspections within the district of Sauk?
The inspection of our current sewer system that we're doing?
When a manhole is repaired and remediated, it was alluded to that somebody within the district of Sauk should be taking that responsibility to inspect those.
Okay. Mr. Howard or Mr. Skidmore? Like we've sent the RFP to repair the manholes out, so when they're done, and then maybe you could just... Oh, Mr. Blackhall?
Sorry, Your Worship. Maybe I'll interject. I think the question may be related to, we were talking about the manholes and the water that was streaming into them, and Mr. Skidmore passed some pictures around to council of what's going on, and we said that during the final, there's two stages of acceptance of assets from a developer. The first one is it's called CCC and something completion, and the other one's called FAC, which is final acceptance certificate. And at the first stage, we have an opportunity to make sure that things are installed properly. We still have a 1-year period before we actually sign off, and if we can make sure our wastewater team is included in looking at those assets at that time, that would be a benefit, I believe.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Reynolds?
Yeah, partially, but does the district of Sauk have engineering specs that have to be followed?
Engineering specs for a development, or
no, remediation
of the manhole?
Yes.
Do we have?
Is there engineering specifications? Does the district of Sauk have any?
Your Worship, if the dialogue is heading towards the question about the contractor that we want to hire to remediate the water inundation, the inspection would be pretty self-evident when we no longer have water infiltration after the product is put into the manhole. I can't remember what the product is called off the top of my head, but it's a sealant of some sort. And as I said, it would be self-observant that the problem would be rectified. We don't need an engineer to tell us that problem has been rectified. If we run across a manhole that is suspected of sinking or something like that, certainly we would bring in somebody like Stantec to advise us on how to remediate. But for the purposes of the I&I, no, we don't have an engineer that's going to be inspecting it. Our operators will inspect after the product is put in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And if we could go back to page 84 of 85, on the collection system, I see its budget, or there was a budget here of $7,500 in 2016 for flow monitoring. When I worked at the plant, there was a set of flow monitoring equipment there. Is that still present?
Any comments on flow monitoring?
Through your worship, no, that is not. That it didn't come over with the transfer.
It didn't come over with the transfer?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you. There was, on the budget for 2018, or 2019, 2019, West Coast Road Force Main. There's $520,000 allotted for that. Can I have an explanation what that entails?
Through your worship, that's through the design update that Stantec has recommended that happen, so that the easement that we have, that line is not overtaxed if we continue to grow. It'll be a bottleneck that they've identified.
Okay.
And that's the cost that they actually put to it. We'd have to go to detailed design to find out what we're doing from that point.
And that's where a report would come to council at that
That's
time?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Councillor Casper?
So just based on that reference to that report, is it possible to recirculate that report to council? Because I think we might have got something, but I just can't recall, okay?
Yes, Your Worship, will Mr. Dan and myself will make sure that council has copies of that. And it's, I believe, the 2016 condition assessment report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Blackhall. Any other questions from members of the public on the sewer?
Just one quick question. I noticed in the 2017 that there was $2,450, I believe, for insurance, but this time it's $5,000. Are there two vehicles or more vehicles?
Through your worship, there's 2 vehicles down at the plant at the present time.
There's 2 vehicles now, and there was 1 last year?
There was 2 last year. Which line item are we talking about, worship?
Vehicle
insurance?
That's pretty steep, I'd say, for insurance. Are the big trucks?
I think they're...
Are they one
If I may, Your Worship, I've got on the screen right now the last year's budget to actuals, and we had just about $2,500 on the insurance. But we'll take a look at that and see what we included in that number. I know we've gone through it, and there may be another reason why that was increased. But we'll come back with that answer at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lures. Any other comments from members of the public? Members of council? The only change I would see is under the vehicle, and I don't know which page it is, there's the fuel cost, and it remains flat for the next few years. You may need to adjust that upwards.
Yeah, Your Worship, if I may, to that, we didn't adjust all these numbers for inflation. I know that came up before, and I actually brought it up as a risk, but we do have the risk covered within the contingency number. It just makes it kind of easier to show, because otherwise the numbers go up by little dollars and, for no reason other than we've inflated them all by 1% or 2% across the board. So this way we can, it's kind of just easier from a presentation point of view of the 5-year plan, but we are incurring inflation, and it is built into that overall contingency number.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Blackhall. I appreciate that next year it would be revised based on actuals anyway. Okay, so council, so we've made it through the sewer part. So I don't believe that we'll have the staff back then next week, because then we'll move right into the fire department. So I'd like to thank everyone, Ms. Hooper, Mr. Derrick, and Mr. Skidmore, for your time and doing the presentations and all the preparedness and fielding all the questions. There may be other questions that, as we go home, that we may dream about, in which case we will send them forward to Mr. Blackhall and get them answered as we look towards adopting the bylaw. So, council reminder, we have our regular council meeting, which will also include the fire department on Monday night, special council meeting starting at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night, and then we'll just see what that schedule looks like from there. Okay? So at this point, I'd like a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. And thanks to the 4 members of public, we did have 5 here that attended and asked questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried.